What's up, everybody? I'm Stan.
I'm Mac.
And welcome to MES Tech,
The hot mess
of tech shows on the internet.
Hey, we're back at it. We're doing things again.
Yeah, no, it's been quite some time, and actually we had a little bit of a guest star in Joe. He came along to help out with an unboxing video on a Rodecaster Pro, which we've been using for our podcast, which is, you can find that in the description. But we're here to talk about what?
A lot of different stuff.
A lot of news. Given our hiatus, we've kind of glossed over a shit ton of stuff inside the tech world.
Right, and we'll touch base on a couple of things that we find really important at the moment. I'd like to start with the RTX stuff that's coming on.
All right, let's do it. What are we talking about for RTX?
So RTX is, ray tracing that everybody's very familiar with at this point, but Exodus has come out, which is one of my favorite games.
Metro Exodus.
Yes, Metro Exodus. Looks like a ton of fun. I haven't actually played that one yet, but I'm a huge fan of the series.
Well, the biggest thing about Metro Exodus, before we get into the technology aspects, is the fact that they totally pulled their support from Steam and went exclusively to the Epic Game Launcher system.
Yes, which is, very, very robust.
But the move to the exclusivity is because of better publishing rights when it comes to distribution, so they're giving them a bigger chunk of the pie when it comes to their sales. But we're, again, here to talk about RTX and technology.
So as far as the RTX updates, they've actually just recently released bugs fixes, stuff to optimize these games, this particular game, so that it actually performs better with the DLSS and ray tracing, as well as optimizing it without ray tracing for older hardware, because they were having a lot of trouble with that crashing, freezing, everything like that.
Yeah, so we went through different videos that were more recent releases that were showing differences in actual lighting effects, and they've done a pretty good job of matching the RTX technology with kind of ambient lights they put in various parts of the scenes, but it's really clear that RTX technology gives you a much more realistic experience as far as like how the lights show up inside the scenes. Particularly in dark areas, you are actually painting with darkness versus having artificially illuminated areas that, well, might not necessarily be visible if we were dealing with the real world.
Hop on YouTube and look up a couple of these differences, because the depth of actual color and realism that comes with RTX in these games is just amazing.
Well, like the grass is casting shadows on itself, which makes it feel a lot darker compared to, say, some of the really bright and vibrant kind of grass textures.
It makes it feel almost 3D. It's crazy.
Yeah, which is cool.
Yes. And so the other big change in RTX is, again, another optimization thing with Battlefield 5, which also recently released DLSS to be implemented in the game, which is increased optimization on that scope 40 or 50%. It's crazy.
So when Battlefield 5 originally released in 4K, playing on an RTX 2080 Ti, when it got its ray tracing, it was getting like 29 frames per second. But with these updates and fixes, you're getting closer to like 45, 47 frames per second out of a 2080 Ti, which puts it almost at that magical 60 FPS mark.
That we're all eventually hoping for, that the biggest, best, greatest can, perform at the average that we expect, but that's fine.
One of the big events that we actually missed while we were away was CES 2019, and there was a lot of stuff that came out of CES 2019. One of the big things was probably from AMD, and we didn't really even get all the details of that. AMD went to CES 2019, and they showed us an 8-core, 16-thread, 7nm with a 14nm chiplet kind of construction, and overall, it outperformed the 8-core, 16-thread 9900K that they had on the test bench next to it. And it consumed like 50 watts less as far as the power is concerned. And this is, according to recent leaks of the kind of proposed lineup of the 3000 series from Ryzen, this is a mid-grade chip, somewhere in the neighborhood of like a 3600, which would be somewhere around like $250, while the 9900K is not in stock anywhere at $530 to $500, which is kind of frustrating for people that are on the Intel side.
I don't have much to say on that.
The real big story is that we don't necessarily know what the full ramifications, the full range of AMD chips are going to be. We did get some glimpses into the X570 chipset, which is going to introduce PCI Express 4.0, which is a huge leap forward in terms of its bandwidth capabilities, as well as we've got a leaked kind of roadmap for where things are going to go, which can level up to about a 3850X Ryzen 9 processor on the X570, 470, 370 chipset series that is possibly going to be pushing 16 cores, 32 threads, a turbo boost up to 5.1 gigahertz, and a retail price of $499.
Which sounds absolutely bonkers when you're comparing it to anything in the Intel lineup.
I mean,
Hooray!
it's pretty close to like 7980XE X299 territory. It's really surprising what these kind of things are going to be able to do, if that's actually legitimate. Even if we only get to the 3700X, which is still being categorized somewhere around a 12-core, 24-thread, still pushing that 5 gigahertz turbo boost category, and at a price that's about $329, which puts it below the cost of an 8700K, still the best bargain for your money. You could get what's the equivalent of the best purchase right now from AMD in the Ryzen 2600, which is about 150, 160 bucks. That's going to be their baseline 3300, and that's going to be $100. You can get into a 6-core 12-thread machine possibly for $100. And this is all expected to be announced around Computex, which is kicking off at the end of May, beginning of June. So that's something that you really need to watch out for, especially if you're looking to build a real good bang-for-the-buck computer. It's something that you really can't miss at this point in time.
Oh, it sounds great for you AMD guys. Anyway, on the other side of that platform, we might actually see, on the Intel fanboy side, the new lineup of processors sometime, possibly soon, in the next year to...
It's only been like 5 years.
3, 8, yeah. With the Sunny Cove architecture, the 10 nanometer that Intel is coming out with is... Well, they announced it hopefully late 2019. Something that's going to be available server-side and shortly followed by actual consumer products.
Which we believe is kind of going to be like mobile-based.
Yes.
So the real emphasis on these chips, and they've got like this Lakeview or Lakefield like architecture that they're trying to set up where all these individual little chipsets and cores are going to be implemented. And they've started to integrate a lot of stuff onto the actual processors themselves, like Wi-Fi controllers and a number of other different things. It's hard to get excited without actually seeing some performance comparisons and whether it's going to be the true 10 nanometer, even in a chiplet where you've got a 14 nanometer main process and a 10 nanometer on the actual core processes, so that way you can get a little bit higher clock speeds, a little bit more efficient, but it still feels like not quite enough if AMD follows through with like a 16-core, 32-thread, 7 nanometer available in the same year, if not earlier than when Intel releases its next product.
And I'm standing up for AMD, something that won't melt down at 16 cores, 32 threads, running at that clock speed, at that wattage. I mean, that's really huge.
Yeah.
That is really huge. While these guys are focusing on, like you said, 1410 nanometer, which is still great, but it's old stuff now. So the new games is what I kind of want to see out of the Intel. But they're focusing on Thunderbolt 3 Wi-Fi connectivity through
11th gen graphics.
11th gen graphics, which are supposed to be capable of 4K right on the chipset, which is going to be cool if that actually comes into play.
While still maintaining multi-monitor support, which is a big thing for Intel integrated graphics.
Right, which is definitely very cool. Hopefully we'll see something new from Intel on the super performance side, because that's what we really, really like.
Well, yeah, those are the things that everybody wants to talk about, super performance stuff. But one thing to keep in mind is that with Intel advancing their iGPUs or their integrated graphics processing units, a lot of programs are taking advantage of those integrated graphics processors, especially if you have a dedicated graphics card. So if you're in Premiere or if you're in like Blender or something along those lines that can take advantage of those GPU processing cores that are normally dormant if you're not using them, that can be a huge advantage over an AMD unit, which doesn't have that APU capability, because AMD isn't packaging integrated graphics units into these processors,
right,
which is half the reason that they're, hundreds of dollars less for the same kind of capabilities, or more.
Right, and part of the reason they also run so much cooler at this point, which still baffles me, because, 10 years ago that was never the case?
Never the case.
No.
But when we're talking about things that run hot, and AMD is still running real hot when it comes to our graphics cards. They also announced their Radeon 7, which was based off of the Vega 20 core, which is a 7 nanometer version of the Vega processing unit. Everybody has felt that it is kind of underwhelming. AMD put a really huge frame buffer onto it because they have 16 gigabytes of HMB2, and you can actually probably see like a whole bunch of different videos out there reviewing the Radeon 7 because it's already been out there for a little while. We're just catching up. But in some cases, it'll outperform an RTX 2080 Ti on AMD optimized games, but some cases it'll perform like an RTX 2070. And for $700, you're in that 2070, 2080, 1070 Ti, 1080, 1080 Ti kind of category. Big thing about that is that it's really a shrunk down version of an old process, which doesn't really help out a lot of things. It might make RX 580s and 590s a little bit cheaper, which I think AMD is going to do pretty soon, but we want to see that 7 nanometer technology inside the Navi core, which hopefully will be announced at Computex as well and released sometimes in July.
Which will be a hopefully a huge increase in performance while still maintaining that memory buffer, which is absolutely insane.
Well, yeah, 16 gigabytes right on. I mean, you start talking like quadros and that kind of stuff.
Such a crazy bus speed that.
Oh yeah, the ability to do compute tasks, that's where AMD's really going with their processors, and especially their GPUs. Not necessarily like what NVIDIA's doing by including your Turing cores and then these other additional cores to process different aspects of the graphical units and to kind of crunch the numbers in certain aspects. AMD is really just going raw compute power on the actual processor itself. We've seen a really drastic decrease in the cryptocurrency market, which means that a lot of GPUs aren't going to be utilized in that same kind of cryptocurrency situation that we saw like 2 years ago, which drove prices up to the moon on GPUs, specifically like the Vega 56 and the Vega 64, and then a number of different GTX 1080 Ti's.
We bought our video cards?
We did a really good job buying our used stuff, which is kind of tough to do in this day's market. One thing that I can say, with everything that's coming out and all the announcements that we're expecting sometime in July, a slight lack of progression on Intel's side and a lack of availability in the newer processors, I cannot in good conscience say, go build your new PC right now.
Yeah, it's something that, honestly, I'd wait for. I was hoping to get something in i9 sometime soon, but at the same time, I'm really waiting for Intel to come out with something new so that I can either have the newest or realize that it's garbage and maybe hop on even the AMD bandwagon, which I can't believe I'm saying.
So that's enough shaming of Mac. This has been MES Tech, and we went through the news. If you guys want to see us cover something specific, hit us up in the comments down below. So make sure you subscribe so that way you can check out the new videos. We're going to get back into this a lot more frequently. That's the whole goal about this. But we want to know what you guys want to talk about. So hit us up in the comments down below, and we can start those conversations.
Fantastic. Again, I'm Mac.
I'm Stan.
And we are the hot mess of internet talk shows about computers and
technology.
I've been writing stuff down for like 15 minutes.
But how much is that going to help?
Not much.
All right.